And here it is, the core question we're tackling. Are universal human rights and Islamic law? Can they actually coexist? Or are they fundamentally on a collision course? There's no easy answer here. The debate is really intense, and it's happening right now. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the debate itself. Then we'll unpack the core ideas behind both universal rights and Islamic law. From there, we'll look at the exact points where they clash, explore some ways they might be reconciled, and then wrap up by looking at this at the crucial, ongoing conversation that it is. Okay, first things first. It is absolutely crucial to understand that this isn't some simple Islam versus the West showdown. Not at all. It's actually a really vibrant and sometimes pretty contentious discussion that's happening within the world of modern Muslim scholarship itself.
Generally speaking, contemporary Muslim scholars are kind of split into two main camps. On one side, you have those who see universal human rights as a purely Western invention, something that's basically irrelevant to Islam. But on the other side, you have scholars who argue that Islamic law, or Sharia, actually established its own universal rights centuries ago, long before any modern Western declarations.
Now, to really get a grip on this debate, we have to be super clear on what we mean by universal human rights. So let's take a second and break down its core philosophical ideas. All right, so the universal rights framework basically stands on three pillars. First, rights are equal for everyone, simple enough. Second, they're inalienable, meaning they can't be taken away from you. But here's the absolute kicker, the most critical point. These rights are considered inherent. They don't come from a government or a specific philosophy or even a divine authority. They come simply from our shared human dignity. Just being human is enough to have them. Okay, so now let's pivot and look at the traditional Islamic approach. Its starting point is completely different, and because of that, it builds a whole different picture of what rights and duties even are. This approach is built on something called a theocentric, or God-centered worldview. What that means is that God is the central, ultimate reality, and because of that, the very concepts of rights and duties are defined by and owed to a divine authority. You can already see how this is a huge shift from the human-centered source of rights we were just talking about. This quote from scholar Abdul Aziz Said just lays it out perfectly. Notice the order of things. Obligations come first. Rights aren't something you're just born with. They're something you acquire when you fulfill your duties to God and your community, as Sharia defines them. And here, scholar S.H. Nasr really doubles down on this exact point. Rights are conditional. They are the results of meeting your obligations. And according to this perspective, if you don't fulfill those obligations, well, you don't have a legitimate claim to rights. So what's the big takeaway here? It's this complete inversion. The Universal Islamic Declaration of Human Rights from back in 1980 actually states it explicitly. Duties and obligations come before rights. It's a totally different way of structuring the relationship between a person, their community, and the law. Okay, so we've laid out two very distinct philosophical foundations. So how does this all play out in the real world? Where does the rubber meet the road? Let's zoom in on three key areas where things get tense. First up, slavery. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the UDHR, couldn't be clearer. Slavery is prohibited, period, in all its forms. Now, by contrast, the Quran and traditional Islamic law do endorse slavery as an institution. Now, it's important to note, they also strongly encourage humane treatment and see freeing slaves as a deeply virtuous act. But the fundamental difference is right there. It's prohibition versus regulation. Next, let's talk about punishment. Article 5 of the UDHR flat out prohibits any cruel, inhuman, or degrading punishment. This runs into a direct conflict with specific fixed punishments in Islamic law known as had. These can include things like amputation for theft, and they're prescribed in the Quran, which means they can't be changed by a human lawmaker. And a third major point of tension revolves around freedom of religion. Universal human rights are very clear that this includes the right to change your religion or belief. However, traditional Islamic law prohibits what's known as apostasy. That's the act of a Muslim converting to another faith, and it's considered a very serious, punishable offense. So, with these major tensions, you have to ask, is reconciliation even possible? Well, a lot of modern scholars actually believe it is. And they argue that the way forward isn't to throw anything out, but to focus on interpretation and the core ethical principles of the faith. See, the whole argument for reconciliation really hangs on interpretation. Instead of getting stuck on historical legal rulings, many scholars are saying, hey, let's emphasize Islam's core ethical values. We're talking about justice, mercy, tolerance, forgiveness, these timeless principles. And the argument is that by applying these values to today's world, that gap with universal human rights can start to be bridged. And all of this brings us right here to our conclusion. This is not some settled issue with a neat final answer. Not at all. It's a living, breathing, evolving conversation, and it has massive implications for law, society, and faith in the 21st century. Trying to reconcile these two incredibly powerful frameworks, it's not just some abstract academic exercise. It really cuts to the very heart of modern Islamic thought. It's about a deep, ongoing struggle to balance sacred tradition with the undeniable realities of the modern world. And so, at the end of the day, we're left with this one final, incredibly powerful question. It is the philosophical core of this entire debate. What is the ultimate source of our rights? Is it found in our shared humanity, or is it granted and defined by a divine authority? How we answer that question, well, it pretty much shapes everything else.